I told you that you could buy a brand new 8 gig graphics card for $120? Now, what if I told you that for that $120, you'd be getting decent performance to downright amazing frames per second, depending on the title and the settings, of course. That's right. This is the Asurix, I believe is how you say it, RX 580. And it is about $120 brand spanking new. I will leave a link down in the description down below if you want to go check this out for yourself. And while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel so you know when all of my newest videos go live. Now, a caveat about this card is it is an RX 580, but it is classed as an RX 580 2048 SP. Now, I had no idea what this was, mainly being Team Green for pretty much my whole computer building life, but it looks like these 2048 SP models popped up in about 2018. They're based on the Polaris 20 architecture. This is an 8 gig model of the card. It does come in 4 gig as well. Now, this card in particular was made by Asurix, and I don't know much about the company, but is my understanding from other creators and some research on this brand and the card that this is a brand new RX 580. It has never been used. Brand new in box, it was sealed and everything. They're not just old cards being refurbished or reworked, is basically what I'm trying to say. And also interesting, according to people that have compared this card to a standard RX 580, they've said that the performance on this card in particular is about 11 to 15%, give or take, below a standard RX 580. But doesn't that mean that we can still play with it? Well, I did some testing on this card to see if this $120 brand new RX 580 would be something that you should consider picking up. And here is what we determined. The first test that we ran is, of course, Heaven. Now, we did run through Heaven on medium. In Heaven, we did pull a score of 2,729. Much like our other tests, we paired this with a Ryzen 7 5800X and 16 gigs of DDR4 3600 megahertz speed RAM. Our max frames in Heaven were 205, our average was 108, and our minimum was 78. 78 was also our 1% lows for that Heaven run on medium. The next test up, we ran Superposition. Now, in Superposition, we pulled a score of 6,484, and I couldn't find the 2048 SP version on the leaderboards here anywhere. But the standard RX 580 looks to be putting up scores of over 9,000. Take that how you will. 9,800 actually on the standard RX 580. Now, we did have a max FPS of 61. Our minimum was 41, and our average frames per second in the medium 1080p preset ran in Superposition was 49. Moving on over to Time Spy. Now, we pulled out a score of 3,950, comparing that to the score of 3,129 or 3,130 from our last Intel Arc A380 test. So this here is a pretty vast improvement to that score. Keep in mind, these are not the same cards, but budget options are budget options. Odd that it seems like the GPU wasn't really working that hard, hardly ever leaving the 30s in terms of temps. So I don't know what was going on with that. And of course, we crushed the 2020 Office computer by nearly 3,000 points. It wasn't even a contest. Next, we ran Firestrike. And in Firestrike, we pulled out a score here of 10,687, comparing this to our last Intel A380 run of 7,146. We crushed it again. Speaking of crushed, 2020 Office computer should retire. Again, temps not leaving the 30s, kind of weird, but what do you do? I'm not too sure what this means, why it's not spinning up, because in gaming, it is definitely hitting temps of around 60 degrees Celsius on an open test bench. But that's the gist of what we ran for benchmarks. Boring. What about gaming? Can we actually play on this thing? Let's get over to that right now with our first gaming test for Counter-Strike Go. Counter-Strike was immaculate on high settings, hovering around anywhere between 240 over 400, depending on where you were in the map, nearly doubling the performance and FPS of the Arc A380 on low. And it was a very pleasant and very good experience, if you were to ask me. Fantastic, actually. Apex Legends is next, and that was more of the same, a solid performance. I didn't start the test until we touched the ground in the map, because sometimes that jump can hitch a little bit, and I didn't want the data to be skewed towards that. Now, our minimum frame rate in Apex Legends was 47, And that just so happens to be our 1% lows as well. Our max frame rate did hit 145, and our average frames per second in Apex Legends was 92. Outstanding. This test was run with everything on medium that I could. Next, we get to my arch nemesis, Halo Infinite. And Halo Infinite likes to be the bane of my existence. Sometimes it's a choppy mess, sometimes it just doesn't want to start at all, and sometimes you get this. Playable experience on medium with some settings set to low, averaging 53 frames per second, having a max of 64, a minimum of 43, and a 1% low of 42. So while we ended up getting the ARC A380 to run Halo on low at a much higher frame rate, and we probably could have if we ran this on low here as well, still pretty solid performance from a card that came out in 2018 based on a card that came out in 2016. Could be worse. Now, this is the first video where we're adding Doom Eternal into the new lineup here. It's new to the lineup. We got that in the Humble Monthly Choice, coming through clutch there. The high preset had us averaging about 90 frames a second in my 45-minute gaming session. If I'm going to be completely honest, I was doing this bench or recording the FPS and things like that for about a half an hour, and then I just completely spaced that they were there, and I shut them off, and then I continued to play for another hour, simply because I was just enthralled and just having so much fun. And it was a very smooth and buttery experience. So our minimum frame rates there were 60, and we had a max of 144. Our 1% lows were 60 FPS, so very solid. Although that's not really a big surprise, as Doom Eternal can run on a Bluetooth non-smart speaker just fine. Can run on toasters, and I think smart shower heads can also run that game at like 60 FPS, so that's not too surprising, but it's noteworthy. Doom Eternal on this thing is going to play like butter. And the finale on our testing videos here always goes to Fortnite, at least for now, because these videos are more geared towards budget GPUs, and you know, all the kids today want to play Fortnite. And here is how that went. For Fortnite, I ran textures on high with everything else set to medium. We were running on DirectX 12 with the renderer set to balanced, I believe. Our minimum frames per second was actually 83. That was the minimum. Our max got up to 145, and our average frames per second for Fortnite with these settings was 112 frames per second on average. This is easily the best performance we have seen on Fortnite on the channel so far. Keep in mind, textures were set to high, everything else was set to medium. Every other test that we've run, most things were set to low and medium, not medium and high. Overall, for 120 bucks, you get a pretty slick piece of equipment here. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, are you gonna max anything out on this thing? Probably not. AAA gaming is not going to be your best friend, but I would believe that you should be able to run a lot of things on medium and low with ease. The thing about the performance of this thing was it was consistent too. It wasn't all over the place. It wasn't like DirectX 12 in this game works perfectly good. DirectX 12 in this game is a choppy mess. It was consistent. And though frames in Halo Infinite were lower, it was still pretty smooth experience. Very playable, if anything. Halo Infinite is a very demanding game, and it's not the easiest thing to run out there. So the fact that this card from 2018, based on a card made in 2016, is able to play it at close to 60 FPS is impressive to me. Now, I would say that if you have a limited budget of around 150 bucks and you're looking at the A380 or this thing is a strong contender. Keep in mind that Intel did just release the new drivers for the ARC cards, and evidently we are seeing some massive frame improvements across the board on a lot of stuff. So that might be something to take a look at. However, this card does run $20 cheaper than the A380 currently, and we're actually able to get some decent performance when things are set to high presets or a mix of medium and high. A lot better performance than we were on the ARC A380 on low. Now, my wife has an RX 570, and the reason that I picked this up initially was to replace her 4 gig RX 570 with an 8 gig RX 580. Now, this does not quite match the specs of a standard RX 580, but it is good enough to give a boost above her 4 gig RX 570. This should give her a nice little bump, and she wants to play Hogwarts Legacy so bad that I'm going to swap this into her machine. So hopefully she'll be able to play that without much issue, at least on medium, right? I may try to paint the shroud white so it can match up with her aesthetic a little better. It does have a nice little brushed steel look, although it is plastic. I mean, other than that, for the price, I have no complaints. This is a solid card for $120. It's bananas to me. I'm a fan of weird stuff, and I have another video coming out on the channel very soon that is way weirder than this. So get subscribed to know when that video goes live. Guys, that's the video. If you liked it, like it. Subscribe to stay up to date on all my latest content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.